And now with the AI technologies that have developed so much with the deepfake and the voice cloning, for example, there are so many dangers that are present in the organizations, and there's a false sense of security.
Hello and welcome to this week's Tea Break. I'm Al-Enazi, joined today by PWM's Yuri and Dr. Zeynep Hizir, an expert in digital transformation working as an engineer at SS&C Technologies. Zeynep, how are you?
Hi Ali, thank you for having me.
I've heard all of us have gone for a mixture that my mum has prepared for everyone here.
I want to thank you so much for this because I'd like to know more about what's in it.
I didn't get no answers from my mother. She said this is a top secret.
What do you call this mixture?
In Arabic it's called al-khalta, which means the mixture.
Oh.
So
very self-explanatory.
So it just has a bit of everything inside.
Well, definitely a shout out to Huda, because this is absolutely wonderful tea that your son's brought in. And we have a mixture of questions today as well. At the moment, the combination, it's not really a secret combination. A lot of it's been determined from the White House. The interview with ABC, where Trump's claiming he's the most successful president in 80 years. And one thing we know for certain, that there's a trade war between the US and China, and there are many parallels, Dr. Zeynep, with the Cold War. We recently saw the cutting-edge technology coming from China, the DeepSeek large language model, and in particular, the article from Edward Legrand from BNP Paribas. He draws attention to the geopolitical situation, and he writes that many European wealth firms are realizing they are over-dependent on non-European models. Why should this be a problem, Zeynep?
This opens up for 4 types of risks that we don't like in the financial space: operational risk, regulatory risk, reputational risk, and financial risk. If a country is not in control of the tools and technologies they're using and adopting and deploying, then that means we don't have control. So operationally, we don't have control because we don't know where it's coming from, we don't know where it's going. That leads to, obviously, the risks associated with, well, GDPR regulation. And when we are not owning this technology and tools, there might be accidental non-compliance issues, which would then cause for regulatory risks. And that would also bring into more financial risks and fines. So that will then lead on to the reputational risk. On the reputational risk, what's also important is if we are not owning the AI tools and technologies, the models that are creating, they will not know the nuances of what's happening in European regions. There might be some false interpretation of data that's being used.
Ali, that's something you've been looking at, the notion of AI as a weapon as well as a tool.
Family offices are becoming, prime targets for cyber criminals. I spoke to Hannes Hoffman, who's the head of global family office at Citi. Citi has developed this cybersecurity framework to help family offices address, these threats. Yet many family offices, remain complacent with limited IT and cybersecurity spending compared to larger financial institutions. Is there a mistaken view that major frauds and scams using AI are generally targeting unsophisticated retail investors rather than well-resourced, family offices and private banks?
As the technology is evolving, the scams are becoming very surgical. So it's not in the normal retailer space, but it's on the family offices, in the private wealth management space that the attacks are moving into. And now with the AI technologies that have developed so much with the deepfake and the voice cloning, for example, there are so many dangers that are present in the organizations, and there's a false sense of security. The financial services industry is highly regulated, so it's expected that there would be appropriate guardrails. We have this auto-encoding technology, which is reconstructing the normal behavior of investments or the investors' behaviors, and then it replicates it. It'll try to look back and replicate it to what the prior request had been. If there was something different, it will flag it. What this means, for example, for an organization is that we don't have to build these large language models and machine learning models and train them for all possible scenarios of fraud, but we're looking at that instance, and that's really a hyper-personalization.
Zeynep, AI is a transformative technology, for our entire readership, and particularly one which Gen Z investors, those born between 1997 and 2012 are buying into. We have a piece from Alex Hughes, founder of Totem Hybrid Events, and he's writing about how AI is empowering wealth management firms to offer hyper-personalized experiences, much like the customization Gen Z expects, from platforms like Netflix and Spotify. And he also talks about how it can be used for community building. Do you think some wealth managers maybe underestimate the need to bring together and curate these whole communities of younger clients to interact, swap ideas, and potentially invest together?
So you are right. I think currently the organizations are still looking at portfolios and management and the fees and performance figures and the valuations. Whereas you mentioned from your question, the platforms, they should be thinking about platforms and where is the Gen Z looking into information from each other. Yuri, you and I had a conversation at an earlier point about some youths taking their investment decisions based on some Reddit articles, for example, or the Reddit community. Private banks could organize investor circles, maybe a joint community sharing of ideas or co-investing, but all powered by the AI. And also building that trust, building that security. Because as we just mentioned earlier, since the scammers will be looking at attacking where the wealth is and where the money is, if I know that I'm in a closed circle and I'm safe and secure, that will also enable me to make investments in a more easy way.
Well, it's interesting what we saw on these Reddit boards over the last couple of weeks, and defence stocks were very much being touted there, especially when the announcements were made that European countries had to spend more money on defence because they were no longer being protected by the US. And we immediately saw some defence investment funds being launched. And we've had an interesting opinion piece from Seraphim, from James Brugger, and he's talking about building the UK into a defence industrial complex, particularly using the dual-purpose technology, which can be used in peacetime and in wartime. Do you expect a new space race taking off with AI as a key component in the technology?
Yuri, it's not taking off, it's already there, and I feel that we're maybe potentially a little bit behind the curve. In my opinion, since COVID, there hasn't been any huge development or adoption or enablement of technology, whereas when we entered COVID, we thought that this was the breaking point for financial services to make huge advances in technology. However, we haven't seen that adoption really.
And it's always fun for us to read the tea leaves, Zeynep and Ali, and to predict where we're going to be in 2035, in 10 years' time. And we had a piece from Reflexivity, the founder, Giuseppe Sette, fellow AI specialist of yours, and he's talking about the widespread adoption of predictive analytics, which has already been happening, and you mentioned hyper-personalization. You both talked about that. We can predict social sentiment for which goes hand in hand with market performance. This aim is to detect these subtle market signals before they become apparent through the more traditional metrics. By 2035, he suggests the entire portfolios will be managed in this way, and there'll be no need whatsoever for human intervention.
Actually, it's just a shift. So you're very right. There will be some jobs and some roles that are eliminated and replaced by machines. On the other hand, this creates for much more creative work, much more interesting work for humans to be able to loop into, rather than doing a lot of non-value add, repetitive, copy-paste information. We can now use our brains for collaborative work. Digital workers working together with the human workforce. It's the augmented workforce that we're looking into. What AI cannot replicate is, for example, understanding some contexts from literature. For example, death. It might not understand that in a poem it's referring to a rebirth of spirituality or something perhaps political. Some nuances between regions or some humor or some local language usage. And it also doesn't at all recognize at the moment very long, complex sentence structures. So AI will start to hallucinate or contradict itself or go in loops. It opens up a whole space for the humanities side of the educational system to be present for the upcoming workforce.
Absolutely. And of course, AI is not capable of making this El Khalta secret mixture tea in the same way as Ali's mum.
And I think this is undefeated, and I think nothing can replicate this. Thank you, Mother, once again. And thank you, Zeynep, for joining us today.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Yuri.
That's it from us now. Thanks for joining this week's Tea Break. Don't forget to catch our weekly episodes on the PWM website or our YouTube channel. And if you've got questions for our guests or just want to dive deeper, you find everything you need online. See you next week.